In 1959, a Soviet scientist stationed at Vostok, one of the most remote Antarctic research bases on Earth, stabbed his colleague. The weapon wasn't premeditated. The motive wasn't revenge or ideology or anything you'd expect from Cold War paranoia. It was a chess game, a single disputed chess game that ended with a knife and a ban. The entire Soviet Antarctic program reportedly banned chess at their stations afterward. One pawn move, one argument, blood on the ice. And that incident, bizarre as it sounds, is the single clearest real-world parallel to something science fiction has been screaming at us about for years. Because when you watch The Expanse and see belters cracking under the pressure of living in tin cans millions of kilometers from Earth, you're not watching fantasy. You're watching a documentary with better lighting. So let's rewind. Let's trace exactly how a chess game becomes a stabbing, how a recycled air filter becomes a mutiny, and why the human brain was never, ever designed for the void. The thing about isolation is that it doesn't announce itself. Nobody wakes up on day one at McMurdo Station or Ceres Station and thinks, this is where I lose my mind. It starts with something microscopic, a sound, a habit, the way someone chews. At the Soviet Vostok Station, the winter over crews were trapped together for months in total darkness, temperatures hitting negative 89 degrees Celsius, with no possibility of evacuation, no resupply, no new faces. You are stuck with these people the way a belter is stuck with their shipmates in the cold corridors of Tycho Station. And in that environment, a chess game isn't a chess game. It's the last domain of control you have. It's the one arena where your choices matter, where you can win something. So when that game goes sideways, when your opponent maybe takes back a move or disputes a rule, it's not about chess anymore. It's about the fact that you haven't seen the sun in 4 months, your circadian rhythm is destroyed. You've been breathing the same stale air as 6 other men who all smell exactly like you. And this one tiny injustice is the thread that unravels everything you've been holding together. This is exactly what The Expanse gets so devastatingly right about belter psychology, and it's something most science fiction casually ignores. The show and the books don't treat space as an adventure. They treat it as a pressure cooker. Belters live in hollowed-out asteroids and spinning stations where every single resource is rationed. Air is metered, water is recycled from your own sweat and urine. Gravity is a luxury you've never had, and your bones have elongated into shapes that mean you can never walk on Earth, even if you could afford the trip, which you can't. Now layer onto that the political reality. Earth and Mars treat belters as expendable labor, as less than human. You're not just isolated physically, you're isolated existentially. You don't belong anywhere except the void, and the void is trying to kill you every second of every day through depressurization, radiation, or mechanical failure. The show gives us characters like Naomi Nagata, who carries the trauma of belt life in every decision she makes. It gives us Anderson Dawes, who channels collective belter suffering into political fury. And it gives us dozens of unnamed background belters who snap, who riot, who make terrible choices. Not because they're villains, but because the environment has been grinding them down one recycled breath at a time. The domino chain is identical to Vostok. Start with scarcity. Add confinement. Remove autonomy. Wait. Back on Earth, psychologists have actually catalogued this. They call it winter over syndrome, and it's been documented at Antarctic stations since the 1950s. The symptoms read like a horror movie checklist. Insomnia, cognitive impairment, irritability that escalates into open hostility, depression, paranoid ideation, and something researchers describe as the Antarctic stare. A 1,000-yard gaze where someone just checks out mentally, stops responding to conversation, stops functioning. They're physically present but psychologically gone. The causes are cumulative and they're almost comically mundane on paper. Disrupted light cycles mess with melatonin production. Confined spaces eliminate personal territory. Lack of novel stimuli starves the brain of dopamine, and the inability to leave, that's the killer. Psychologists call it no-exit stress. When you know you cannot walk away from a situation, your brain processes every minor irritation as a threat because the normal coping mechanism of distance has been removed. Now think about that in the context of Eros Station in The Expanse. Thousands of people crammed into a station in the asteroid belt. already living with winter over syndrome as their baseline normal. And then the proto-molecule hits. The horror of Eros isn't just body horror. It's the horror of people who are already at their psychological limit being pushed past it with no exit. The locked doors on Eros aren't just a plot device. They're the Antarctic winter made literal. Here's where the domino effect becomes terrifying in both reality and fiction. At real research stations, the pattern is almost always the same. A small slight goes unaddressed. Maybe someone takes more than their share of the fresh food, or plays their music too loud, or tells the same story for the 40th time. The offended party stews on it because there's nothing else to think about. The resentment calcifies. Factions form. Two people who don't like each other become two groups of people who don't trust each other. Communication breaks down. Cooperation suffers. And then something critical happens. A mechanical failure, a medical emergency, a supply shortage. And the crew that should be pulling together is instead fractured along the fault lines of a 6-month-old argument about who left crumbs in the microwave. At the Australian Antarctic station in 2018, a crew member allegedly assaulted another with a hammer. At a Russian station in 2018, a researcher stabbed a colleague, again, reportedly because the victim kept spoiling the endings of books in their shared library. Books, endings of books. That's the seed. The Expanse dramatizes this same cascade across an entire civilization. The Belter's grievances start small and legitimate. Unfair labor practices, oxygen taxes, children dying of preventable diseases because medicine is hoarded by the inner planets. Each grievance is a domino. The OPA forms, factions within the OPA splinter. Marco Inaros emerges, and suddenly those accumulated small injustices have been weaponized into an asteroid bombardment of Earth that kills billions. The line from "they're taxing our air" to "let's throw rocks at their planet" is horrifyingly straight when you trace the dominoes. And it mirrors the line from "he spoiled my book" to "I stabbed him" with eerie precision. The scale is different. The psychology is identical. The most unsettling part of all of this is how predictable it is and how consistently we fail to prevent it. NASA has spent decades studying isolation psychology for exactly this reason. They know that a Mars mission means years of confinement, and they know what confinement does. Their high seas habitat simulations in Hawaii, where crews live in a Mars-like dome for months, have produced crew conflicts so severe that participants have had to be separated. And these are carefully screened, psychologically evaluated, highly motivated volunteers who know they're being watched. The Expanse makes the devastating argument that we will export this problem to space at scale and do nothing about it. The inner planets in the show have the resources to make Belt life humane. They choose not to. And that choice, that negligence disguised as economics, is the first domino that eventually leads to the Free Navy, the Laconia Gate, and the restructuring of human civilization through violence. It all comes back to the chess game. Not the literal chess game at Vostok, but the metaphorical one. The moment where someone in power could have recognized that isolation, plus scarcity plus indifference, equals explosion, and decided to do nothing. Every Belter riot in the Expanse is a chess game. Every Antarctic assault is a chess game. The seed is always tiny. The consequences never are. So here's what I want you to fight about in the comments. Given everything we know about isolation psychology, everything documented at Antarctic stations, everything simulated by NASA, everything dramatized in the Expanse, is long-term space colonization even ethical if we can't solve the confinement problem first, or is the suffering just an acceptable cost of expansion? I genuinely don't know where I land on that, and I suspect you don't either. If this kind of deep dive into the places where real science and science fiction collide is your thing, subscribing to this channel is probably the best decision you'll make before someone spoils your book and things escalate.